hybrid meeting protocol. I'm sure everybody knows it inside and out. Lisa, you're okay with it? Yeah, you're the only one then. Brilliant. Okay. In terms of the meeting itself, obviously, if you would like to speak, please indicate it by showing your hands, and you'll be asked in order of what they are put up. Lisa, if you can just indicate as normal on screen, that would be fantastic. Pnawn da pob, croeso i'r cyfedd, and welcome to Merthyr Tydfil County Borough Council's meeting of today, which is a Scrutiny Corporate Support and Resources, 4 p.m, 19th of September. Please note that the meeting will be recorded. Mai, can I ask you to start recording? Excellent. Thank you very much. As I said, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Have we got any apologies for absence? Okay. Any declarations of interest? Okay. Any declarations of interest from any members? Okay, we'll move swiftly forward then onto the reports. It's a pretty full agenda today, so thank everybody for coming today. The first report is agenda item 3. It's the Forward Work Programme 2023 to 2024 to consider the attached report. Okay, I'll open it straight out to the members. Have we got any questions, comments? Gary.
Yes, Chair, I think our previous conversations, I know was missing from the forward plan, that we were going to have a review of the agile working and home working policy to see whether it's been successful and its implications for service delivery. I think we discussed that a couple of meetings ago, and it's not on the list.
Yeah, I know you've brought that up, and that's something which I believe we're going to be taking it through a workshop. If I thought we were going to talk that through with me, or something as a committee, we said.
Potentially, I think it depends on members wish to review it, really.
Yeah. The way we're thinking of taking it forward is through some sort of workshop, depending on what all the other members think and what their thoughts on that. So I'll open it up to everybody else.
Obviously, we've had a couple of conversations with regards to agile working. It's something obviously we discussed also with Cabinet and the Executive in terms of how we look at agile working as an authority and going forward. It's something that we are discussing from a corporate management perspective as well. It may be worth also scrutiny members having a look at Audit Wales. It's just been published, bringing forward lessons from our work on workforce and assets in local government, which actually has only just been published September 23. And actually within this, they've done an analysis across Wales in terms of hybrid working and how that is affecting local authorities and consideration in terms of asset management, workforce, and in terms of digital. So it's very much something we are looking at from an authority perspective. And it's just when you want to bring it back to scrutiny, I think there's a bit of work we need to get under our belt in terms of answering a lot of this anyway. And obviously I know it's of concern to members, but it's just I'm more than happy to bring it back when we've done some of this work, but we'd be able to get a clear position for you then. It's just, it wasn't on the forward work plan, but it's just when we can fit it in with enough rigor in it to have a proper discussion on it.
Okay, thanks, Ellis. Gary, is there anything you want to come back in with?
Timescales, I think, as Chair, obviously it's the override report for Wales is fine, but within the report is several references to performance, and there's not to be an impact on performance, and it's mentioned about 3 or 4 times within the document. My wondering is, are officers, managers monitoring performance as they should be doing, and has there been a negative impact? That's more, I think, from a member's point of view, I think they're more interested in, and from the public point of view, have services deteriorated? So that's the main issue in my mind. I can understand why it's there. I understand, yes, it does happen. I've got no problem with that. But whether it's from a council, I'll be better off as a result. And that's where I'm coming from.
Okay. Councillor Mitten.
Apologies, I just had to answer the door. Let me just get myself straightened onto my notes. Apologies, Chair. Okay, just one thing I noticed, it was just that it isn't a question, it's just an observation on the forward work plan. On the 30th of November, we've got the digital strategy. I'm just catching my breath. But we've also got it again on the 23rd of April. So I'm just wondering whether that's just an accidental duplication or if it's a follow-up. And then whether we could maybe change one of those around, be guided by officers and their timings, so we could perhaps use that opportunity to look at another issue.
Lisa, I'm being reliably informed that one is digital and one is data, so they're slightly different.
Might be a typo.
Oh,
Well, there could be a
apologies, it could
typo.
be me. Yeah, typo. Oh, is that, that's fine then. If it is, that's absolutely fine. Apologies, being out of breath, I catch my breath back.
Thanks, Lisa. Going back to the other point in terms of what Gary's mentioned about agile working, I think as an authority, agile working is the same with all other organisations. It's probably something which is here to stay with us for the future, whether you call it agile working, hybrid working, there's 2 days a week, 3 days a week in the office, etc. I don't think there's much going back from that now. But yeah, it is right. Is it working for others? And it is down to the managers to actually manage the staff to ensure they're getting the best out of the staff. So for us as a scrutiny panel, it's probably looking at what the results and what the outcomes are and what the performance has been like over the last couple of years, I suppose, Gary. Yeah. Any other members' comments? Louise, Lee, David? How would you like to proceed with that? Are you happy with what Ellis has suggested? Bill? Yeah.
Well, you can do it. Can we have some sort of workshop on this? Because at the end of the day, people are telling me that there's not enough information coming to the public. They've got a phone. So when officers are not in work, they can't answer the phone. I know Rachel will explain it now a lot more. But then the people spend a long time on the phones to get an answer to it. As the officers who worked, their words are going to work and everything else. So can we have a look, really look at this serious and not just say agile work here to stay, because the public is saying it's not good enough. No, because I got the same problem with all the homes. They're telling me they don't get the information that they want, and it's a long time then to reply back.
Okay, thanks, Bill. I'd probably suggest a way to move forward with this then.
Come on, go.
All right, Bill?
Yeah, fine.
To suggest a way forward with this, Ellis, would it be appropriate then for some sort of overarching report to be brought back? How and what form that takes is another thing then, and probably the members then can look at that and deem what we would like to do with it, whether it's a workshop looking at it or some sort of report. David?
Councillor Johnson.
The timescale we're looking at, whether we have workshops or when the report would be likely to be ready.
I come in. So I think part of the challenge is going back to the performance management discussion, is how we evidence pre-COVID in terms of departmental performance to now, right? And obviously we're in the process of trying to recraft our performance management framework organizationally, but it's having comparable data to as in pre-advent of agile working to post, and how you compare and contrast. If you wanted a workshop to actually challenge some, as some of the issues you've just said in terms of accessibility, as in availability of service provision, with, I'm just a little bit concerned that we may not be able to compare and contrast the data as you're asking for, because it's not captured in that way. Now, whether, to address the concerns in terms of service provision and availability, in a workshop format, and try and address we can bring in frontline managers and what we can have a line of inquiry in terms of how it works and how it's not working. That can be achieved. Having the data to pair with the challenge in terms of is it better or worse pre and post COVID? I don't know. You know, I genuinely don't know if we'll be able to answer that. Bringing my colleague Andrew, we just had been afternoon discussion in terms of data. Andrew, going back to what we've had previously, we wouldn't be able to evidence data back in 2018, 2019.
Well, I think the measures will have changed. How we actually capture data then compared to now would probably be different as well. What we could actually do is understand the position as we are now and going forward, as opposed to getting hung up on perhaps comparing before and now, because the operating models will have changed and everything. So if we do take this item forward, perhaps is to draw a line in the sand and look at where we are now against what our public feedback would be in recent engagement with the public. I think it would be quite difficult to compare exactly like for like prior to the pandemic, because it's not just agile working has changed, change of personnel, growth in some departments, decreases in other departments, the way the digital offer has expanded compared to face-to-face offers. So there's numerous influences then really that could have impacted on our performance. So it may be difficult to hone in on whether it was just that agile working that had the big impact. So perhaps what we need to do going forward is understand the position we are now, and then what that needs to look like in the future to make sure that that operating model meets the needs of the public.
Yeah, can't get my words out. Thanks, Andrew. Andrew?
Yeah, I think what's important, I take your point, Gail, it's difficult to compare, but I think what's more important is we have some assurity that performance is being measured now and how that is going to be measured. And we need to come down 4 years into this on the side of what is our policy in terms of percentages of staff working agile from an agile perspective, because if we've got 50% of our staff that are working from home, then they have asset implications in terms of what we need to perform. And do we repurpose and move those assets on? Because there are budget implications from what we're talking about in terms of performance as well as performance itself. So there's a lot of work in there. I mean, I'm not underestimating what we've got to do to get to that. So I don't know whether we're a bit premature in asking for a workshop, because I think there's a lot of work to do before we can get to that point.
Yeah.
Bill
Bill is one or two others. I'll call you back.
Oh, no problem.
Right? Lee?
I'd like to know on different departments. You know, some departments can't work agilely anymore. They've been told that they can't work from home, and then some can. And all the different departments, how many days a week can you work in this team, and how many days a week can you know, who's not working agilely, and also about managing time as well. Like, you know, officers are working like 7 till 7, and now they're using that toil. And how that's impacting if they bank in, you know, is it only 1 day a month you can get in lieu, and use that as a holiday, or I don't know the full system, because people are working a lot more hours, so that's why, you know, that's what I'd like to see.
Alex, do you want to come in on that before I bring Lisa and then Bill?
Yeah, I mean, okay, so going back to your questions, Ellie, I mean, we can certainly pull together a report in terms of, look, this is the position as is, right? So in terms of what the expectation across the organization is, in terms of which departments are, you know, working agilely and which aren't. Obviously, you know, a lot of that is down to the discretion of the manager if they're saying, right, I need you back in for whatever reason. But broadly speaking, it's still expectations of 50-50, where services are able to work agilely. Obviously, some of our services can't. So we can certainly put an as-is report together. It's just going back to Gary's question. I get the line of question, and I understand that. He's just being able to evidence it correctly. I think we'll struggle trying to compare data previously. I think going forward, we need to make sure that from a performance management perspective, that agile working is used for the right reasons in the right area, and it is accountability and performance management at every level. That is the framework we are trying to build, and that's the work we're doing live right now in terms of, I've explained to you previously the 3 tiers and how that is going to go forward. 3 tiers of delivery and 3 tiers of performance management, trying to pair with it. So as I said, it's back to Andrew's point. There's a lot of work which is currently underway. I'm more than happy to bring it back, but I just want to make sure, we can bring it back in stages, perhaps. I'm more than happy with that. It's just that I'm struggling with being able to answer your fundamental question at the minute in terms of, is performance better or worse than pre-COVID, when it's changed a lot and that data is not compared and contrasted. Right.
I don't think we need to get hung up on pre-COVID. I'm concentrating on the policy, what the policy says. So you need to measure up. So when you agree somebody to work, sorry. It says quite clear within the policy, it's up to the line manager to allow somebody to work from home or whatever agile working. When they do that, and it's the current policy, which has been in existence 18 months, I'm not sure when. There must be clear objectives and measurable outputs which are set and regularly reviewed between the line manager and employee.
Yeah.
Is that happening?
Right.
What are the measurables? So forget pre-COVID.
Okay.
When you've agreed somebody to work agilely, you're now going to measure that person from, yes, you can work from home or whatever. There's your measurable outputs. And this is our review of those outputs. Not pre-COVID, it's what's happening now. And then performance management, line managers, employees must agree measurable outcomes and what constitutes effectiveness for their service areas. This should cover issues such as productivity, quality of work, service standards, and timeliness. So that's something you can report on now. Forget pre-COVID. I've asked to work from home. You said yes.
Yeah.
This is what I expect of you. My question has been to HR at one time, is that our managers doing that?
Yeah.
How regularly are they reviewing it? Where's the report of the review going to CMT? So
Yeah.
are you satisfied that those little reviews are taking place between the manager and the employees and measuring the outputs? So it's not pre-COVID, COVID, it's the existing policy now is applied. Is it working?
Okay. Right. Okay. I think, sorry. I think for us to actually bring back a report to that, to answer those questions from a data perspective, we'll take that offline and have a look at how we can facilitate that to answer that question in that way. Obviously, we concentrate on corporate and service level performance at the moment in terms of making sure, there is an entire infrastructure of personal performance development, PPTPs across the organisation, but in terms of having the agile working question answered as guys articulated there against the policy, we just need to take offline and come back to.
Okay, that's great. I'm happy with that, Gary. Is that okay?
The policy being applied and how is that being reviewed and measured?
It makes more sense. Lisa?
Yeah, I think there's some confusion here, Chair, with all due respect, and I think it's wider than what my colleague has just outlined, because I'm going back to Bill's comment. So my suggestion was going to be that it needs to be taken offline, because I think there's a bigger conversation to be had. There's two elements here, which I think one which Bill was alluding to, quite rightly in some respects, regarding that customer facing departmental requirement, if you like. So where does agile work for that? And I think that's where the evaluation is needed, is on customer impact and whether that's positive now, because as the chief exec said, there's far more opportunity to have digitalization contact now, with the council. And then I think it goes back to Gary's comment regarding the HR policy, which I think my colleague Lee asked for. So again, that's another separate issue, because then just to be more familiar with what that HR policy outlines, etc., with regards to agile working, but not forgetting, Chair, that this is going to be a different body of work for different portfolios then, for different departments, because, it's going to be different for our education department and the staff in there working agile. That may be really effective and that may be working well, but it may be then totally different picture, for one of our other portfolios, perhaps like a housing, like we've discussed previously. So this is why it is a much bigger piece of work than a workshop, a policy, or just, you know, us discussing a scrutiny. It would probably take us an afternoon, a whole day. So I think, Chair, my suggestion would be to definitely take it offline, really break down what we're looking for, you know, and then split that into the forward work plan, because it couldn't be done as one whole scrutiny report because of the different aspects of agile working and its impact.
Thanks, Lisa. Bill?
Speaker has said, but what's our plan for further months and years to come? If I have workers going to stay there, I'd like to know who's working home, and what phone numbers are. Because as a councillor, people phone me up and say, oh, I'll get back to you. Time I go around the block, right, it takes me 3 or 4 days to find out who I've got to speak to, who's working, who's not working. So it's a bigger picture here, and where are we going to go for the next couple of years? Because people want to know who's working, how they're going to get there, what information there. And that's what we're struggling, that's what we're doing now. We get the same problem where you go. Because I dealt with something last week, I had to go around the offices, and it's not the money coming off the local authority, it's an outside project, but the local authorities are funding it, are part of it. So, you know, it's other bigger issues than you think.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So to move progress with this, we do need to take this conversation offline. Ellis, you okay to take that forward? Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, in terms of there are recommendations, nobody else has indicated to speak or comment on the report. Well, there are recommendations set out in 2.1 that we agree the items set out in the forward work programme. So can I have a quick show of hands for that, please? Great, that's carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next agenda item on the report is agenda item 4, is the corporate self-assessment. I'm going to hand this one straight over to Ellis and the team to give a brief introduction, and then we'll open it up to members' questions and comments. Thanks, Ellis.
Okay, no, thank you, Chair. I'm going to give my voice a rest and pass it to Andrew to take you through the report, if that's okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So first thing to point out, this is the second year now of our corporate self-assessment report, and the reporting period is for last financial year, so it's 22-23. The first report was received well, albeit the feedback we had, particularly from members, was that perhaps it was a bit too heavy in terms of content. There was also feedback in terms of getting to the point quite quicker, and then we've also had feedback from the WLGA through various sources, and the general source of the feedback, or the emphasis of the feedback, was around evaluation. So even though this is a report which contains all the data we have, etc., what are we actually doing then with that data? How are we using it for evaluation, and how are we using it to improve, and particularly to pick up on those key actions as a local authority that we want to take forward, hence the action plan at the end of the report. So we've aimed this year to address those issues with a streamlined report, again getting to the facts quite quickly, and that was set out in Appendix 2 and 3 of the report. So I've got colleagues from corporate management team with us today if we got any specific questions on those areas. So the Act itself sets out really the 3 areas that we as a local authority should look at. So remembering that this is a corporate assessment as opposed to a service assessment. And they are set out in paragraph 3.4. So it's for us to exercise our functions effectively, to use our resources economically, efficiently and effectively, and also then concerning our governance to make sure that's effective in securing those above 2 points. Obviously, we work within a realistic A, time frame, and B, scope in terms of our finance. So again, it needs to be a smart set of objectives or set of evaluation that we carried out, making sure that we are specific and realistic. And having fed back as a workshop with corporate management team a couple of weeks ago, we did realise that some of our actions, even though they were the right ones, perhaps could be more targeted for a set period of time, because there are some real wicked issues that we're dealing with, whether we're talking about homelessness, whether we're talking about our education and absenteeism in schools. They're all there, But when we're talking about how can we address them meaningfully, I think that needs a bit of work. So in terms of self-reflection, that's what we've looked at. So where we were, you'll probably remember, particularly Gary, you probably would have signed a few of them off in your director's days, the self-assessment reports that we looked at. So they were the annual performance reports. So it's changed its emphasis slightly in terms of the new reports now, and that's set out in section 4. What we have got in section 4 is that I think we've agreed it no end of times now. The plan, do, review, improve, or plan, do, check, act as it was. And Lisa, I know you make sure that you drill home the point about the so what question, and Sue in terms of arresting colleagues as well. So I think it is important, and in the evaluation section within the report this year, that we do really hone in on that to understand what's worked well and how that really does have an impact on some of our key outcomes as a local authority. So then if we move on to section 5, where we are now, this is predominantly sets out the new act. There's a link on 5.1 as well if you need more information around the guidance, and feel free to ask questions of the team on that. Then on Appendix 1, it sets out our governance framework. So again, we're often, or I think it was a couple of years ago, where we had the question around what is governance and what does that mean to the local authority, and we agreed then in one of our corporate plans that the framework in Appendix 1, page 27 of the report pack does actually hone in on that. So where do we want to be? That is set out within section 6. And as we've alluded to in the first item, really, around our performance framework and wider governance, that remains a priority for the local authority, along with using our risk management, our audit action plans and everything to facilitate that. And then sitting, even though they're at a corporate level, but linking into our service level, then we've still got those 4 new corporate wellbeing objectives that we've agreed. But as I said, this report refers to the last year, so it still has the old wellbeing objectives that we're reporting on at that particular time. So I'll just quickly go through section 7, where once we've had scrutiny today and we've considered the feedback, we can strengthen our report in readiness to take that to the Governance and Audit Committee. We have to take it there as part of the meeting that legislation, where they'll take perhaps more of a helicopter view as to what the report means and how that fits in with our governance. And then following that, we plan to take it to council in November. And like all annual reports, we then publish that on the website. And to meet the rest of the legislation, we'll share that then with the relevant people, including various ministers. So that leads us then to that's more around the process, but we also go back to that question that we've been challenged on about the evaluation. So how are we going to evaluate this, and how are we going to build that into forward plans for scrutiny, whether it be forward plans for the Governance and Audit Committee, but ultimately leading to that Appendix 3, I think it is in this report, the action plan. So we've had an overview of the progress to date, but perhaps we can hone in on some of those key things to address, and perhaps break them down a bit so that they are more achievable and are more realistic over the time period we're talking about. So we'll set out a year's report and a year's action plan, and then we'll review that this time next year formally. However, we want to work on our governance to make sure that that is being reviewed on a monthly basis, and then through our quarterly performance indicator QPIRs, our quarterly performance reports. Also then the delivery through our steering group and up to our I think it's corporate and wellbeing board now, and also making sure that on a service level, key areas are in place through the SMBs, etc., etc. So that governance forms the backbone really of the action plan, but there are then specific actions which lay underneath those against each of the wellbeing objectives. So happy to take questions, but like I say, colleagues are here then on the specific areas, should you have any questions on those. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Andrew. Can I open it up to members' questions and comments, please? Okay, I've got a couple and I'll probably start off. That's okay. initially, on Appendix 1, Andrew, page 27 of the report, it's got the diagram in the second, a governance framework. Is that going to be what it is going forward? Because it looks a bit blurry to me, and the text in the middle is quite small and hard to read. Is the final version going to be different to that?
Yes, Chair. We are looking at the accessibility of our documents as well, and we're hoping to have an easy read in addition to the report. But yeah, for whatever reason, the print does become blurred, but we'll definitely address that for the final report.
Brilliant, thank you. Next question then is on page 28 of the report, and Steve, this will probably come to you. Sorry, I was looking to my right then, Steve, and I didn't realise he was in front of me. You're on the bottom table now, isn't it? Near the door, I suppose.
Steve.
In terms of the governance and resources costs and the corporate costs, and they looked at separately. Can you just give a brief idea what the difference is between these costs? And we're not asking for a massive budgeting information decision, just to give a little bit of context and clarity to the differences, please.
Yep, I certainly can, Chair. If you look at the governance and the resources section there, and for last financial year, we were looking at £8.2 million spend there. That includes all of the functions which you've called the support services in the back office. So that includes a finance section, legal, HR, comms. So it's all those types of functions. It's the back office sections basically. And then if you look at your corporate costs are looking at those quite major items where you've got your levies. We get levies from the fire service, from the Beacons National Park, the Coroner Service, and the Glamorgan Archives. It also includes our capital financing costs, where it's the costs of borrowing, where we just support our capital expenditure. We've got audit fees included in there. We have insurances costs. We've got bank charges, subs. So there's a whole range of things then within the corporate costs. And also we have any reserves that we use would be netted off. Sorry, just looking at the actual second. We just got the reserves as a separate line there, but the corporate costs will also include things such as the collection fund surplus, which is our council tax collection. Our corporate vacancy factor is also included within there, and that's monies that we strip out of services when a post becomes vacant. So there's a whole range of stuff, Chair, really. So I just won't go into that in any more depth. But then I hope that just gives you just some indication of those budget heads.
No, thanks, Steve. That's more than adequate. Thank you very much. Moving on to the next part then. I'm not sure who'll answer this one. The corporate complaints headline section. I noticed there's been a substantial increase from 2020 to 2021 up until where we are by roughly 180 complaints over the last 2 years. All it's showing is just a genuine headline figure, and for me, I would probably like to see or like to know what perhaps the outcomes of these complaints were, because all it's saying is just stating a fact rather than what perhaps the outcome would necessarily be. Do we have any analysis of these outcomes, and do we have them that we can send out to anything, or would that be coming forward in the report, or we just saying what they are? And
Thank you, Chair. Well, to answer your question, yeah, we do look to do that evaluation as part of the report, but we also produce an annual corporate complaints report, one for social services and one for corporate complaints. And some of those issues are addressed within that document as well. But what we aim to do here is pull out some of that information to be able to help us with our evaluation of how we improve.
Thanks, Andrew. So we are actually looking at things and looking to see if there's any trends and things going forward to see if there's anything we can change, improve and adapt to lower the amount of complaints.
Yeah, well, first of all, it was brought up, I should have said earlier, in our quarterly performance review session as well. First of all, we need to understand the reason for the complaints. I know that we have changed our operating model, particularly from a customer services point of view, Rebecca, where if there are complaints that escalate to a certain point, we pass them on to corporate complaints more proactively now. And also we've got different avenues where people can actually place a corporate complaint. So it's easier and more visible for them to do so. So it may be that that's the case now, whereas before they would have shown up somewhere else as like an informal complaint. So there is that to consider as well, Chair. But ultimately, we need to understand the reason for the complaint and try to understand then what that solution possibly could be.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. In terms of risk, just an updates on the register in October 22 and subsequently in January 2023. Two identified risks have both increased to a score of 20. The first one, the risk that council does not balance the budget and is not financially sustainable. And the second, the council is not sustainable going forward. I understand through conversations we've had with different groups that we're going to be looking at different budget proposals and things going forward. However, but are we doing anything else to mitigate these risks as a local authority? Have we had any engagement with Welsh Government and other partners internally and externally to explore potential solutions and mitigate opportunities around our financial position and the sustainability of the services?
Do you want to go in first, Steve? I mean, obviously the discussion in terms of savings proposals is ongoing, as it always is. That was a moment in time, obviously, given the current information we understand and our current budget position, and that's why we've reflected on the risk, as normal risk assessment takes us to that point. In terms of asking Welsh Government, obviously Welsh Government have been fairly clear in where they are from a budget perspective. But there are ongoing discussions and dialogue across many levels with WLJ, Solace Chief Execs, obviously South Wales Treasurers. Sorry, not South Wales Treasurers. What are they called? Sorry, Steve. Society Welsh Treasurers, not South Wales Treasurers, and the South Wales Treasurers. But so the dialogue is constant, Chair. Does it change the risk as we see it at the moment? I don't think so, but Steve probably give a more accurate position than me.
Yes, I would add really that what happens every year about this time of year is that every authority will then complete it is a financial survey, and we basically look at what are the financial pressures within this current financial year, and then we also look at what the financial pressures are in going forward. So that's over the next number of years, and it's then through the Welsh Local Government Association. Those actual figures are then consolidated into one report, and that is used as a lobbying tool then with the actual Welsh Government, and it indicates what the financial issues are across Wales for both the current year and then into the future. So obviously, if you look at the risk scores and the actual increase in the risk scores is for 22-23 initially, we were basically looking at an overspend as at month 10, month 11. We had some further grants coming in at the end of the financial year, and some of the assumptions that we had in the monitoring reports were probably worst case at that stage, so they came in better than what was expected at that time. So we've ended up in 22-23 with a financial surplus outturn rather than that overspend. In going forward, is when we basically factor in and we reflect on what the Welsh Government indicative settlement is for 24-25. That's an increase across Wales of 3.1%. And if you compare that with the current financial year, and our settlement was just a little bit under that Welsh average. So it could well be the case we could be under 3.1%. We don't know what the settlement is going to be at this stage. We hope it's going to be better. But if you factor in that settlement increase, which is quite a modest increase, and then you compare it with still high inflation, there's still high interest rate, our contract costs, and just other pressures that we have. And that's why then that figure has then gone up from the 15 in July to where we currently are in 20. But from the mitigation side of things again, I'd like to refer back to the answer I gave earlier on. It's about that survey that we basically give, and that survey for all the Welsh authorities, and that is our lobbying tool.
Thank you, Steve. Okay, moving on to page, sorry for the number of questions, moving on, well, sorry, no, sorry. Moving on to page 33 of the report, under the heading workforce. The levels of sickness, as you see, will have gone up from September 2022 from 78 to June 2023 to 172, which is roughly 100, well, all by eight. In terms of that, then, that's quite an alarming amount to go up. Two questions. Is there any specific reasons for the significant rise? And also, in terms of the sickness in month, is the 78 and the 172 days or the number of staff?
I think we'll have to review those. I believe 172 is instances as opposed to staff. So it could be multiple instances for the same amount of staff.
Okay. And it's also a significant rise. Is there any reasons recorded for that then?
We can pull a report to look at that data and provide a written response, Dan.
Okay, great. No, that's great. Thank you very much. Okay, moving on then to page 41 of the report under the best start theme. This shows the number of pupils on reduced timetables is reduced, which is really good to see. I understand that Estyn made a recommendation relating to the use of reduced timetables in the latest inspection of the local authority, stating that the local authority does not monitor closely enough the use of reduced timetables and their impact on pupils' progress. Is this still the case, or do we have a proper monitoring procedure on the use of reduced timetables? And if so, what does the process entail?
I'll answer that, Chair. Yes, we certainly have a more robust process in place where we meet with the members of officers from my team, meet with the school staff and also the parents, because one of the concerns from Estyn was we put a reduced timetable in place for whatever reason. However, we weren't convinced, they weren't convinced that the safeguarding when they weren't in school was robust. So if a child is put on reduced timetable, it also usually means that they cannot manage a whole day in school for behaviour reasons or for health reasons. That the parents will actually sign to say that during the time that they're not in school, they are doing the work that has been set by the school, and they will actually be monitored by the parents. We do to keep a track on those that have a reduced timetable of over 4 weeks, because the expectation is that it's a short-term process. We don't actually put it in for long-term. We do have some children that are on reduced timetables for longer than that, but it is something that we are working with schools and with parents to actually review. It is used by schools to reduce exclusion rates, so they put on a reduced timetable as opposed to being excluded. So they are having some education. It is something that Welsh Government are looking at in quite some detail, because they don't want it to be used for behaviour. Well, that means that our exclusion figures are going to go up, with a reduced timetable. The children are in school for some part of the time, but actually they're at home because they cannot manage their behaviours moving forward. But there is a far more robust process in place now than there was when we had our arrest and inspection.
Thank you, Sue. Only 2 questions left, if that's okay. On page 43 of the report pack, it mentions that we've achieved our recycling collection rate of 64.87 in 2022-2023. But I understand the target for 2025 is to reach a collection rate of 70%. Do we think this is achievable? And will there be any ramifications should we not achieve this target?
Obviously, unfortunately, Judith's not with us this afternoon, but the conversations we're having, we think that that target is going to be extremely challenging. If we don't meet the target, there is a potential that will be monetary fines for the local authority. So obviously, work is underway to see how we can do everything we can to make sure we achieve that target. And obviously, we'll be sharing with Council and Scrutiny as we go. But there are significant concerns from the staff body in that area that we, it's good. It's a big step up when, for those in the community that are already recycling and the hard to reach are really hard to reach. So we'll see where we get to when we report back. But obviously, Judith can expand on that far greater than I, but it's going to be a tall ask.
Okay, thanks, Ellis. Anybody else, any other questions or comments from any of the members? No. Okay, we'll move on to the next item of the report, which is agenda item 5, customer service and the one-stop shop progress review. I'll hand it straight over to Rebecca. It's pages 49 and 52. So yes, you're free to go. Thank you very much for attending. Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate the summary and purpose of the report to start with. Summary is it's an update on the progress against actions identified at the customer services workshop, which was in February 2023, which includes 2 things: the change in customer interaction and engagement with council services, i.e. Online applications, customer service requests, telephone queries, etc. And also how services have been strengthened. And the second point is a breakdown of customer queries and the outcomes of those queries where possible. At 3.1 to 3.3, just looking at the background, which is that the one-stop shop has continued to provide the 8:30 to 5 p.m. service and support customers via offering appointments and also through online services. On to 4.1 to 4.2, we previously discussed the reopening of the one-stop shop reception, and that was effective from the 23rd of March 2023. Just to note that during this period, the one-stop shop supported the most vulnerable customers by offering appointments. This model supports the council's agile working policy, and it also helped accelerate our channel shift agenda. If I move to where we are now, which is covering then 5.1 to 5.8, on the 24th of October 2022, the reception extended the opening hours to 8:30 to 5 p.m. Monday to Thursday, and then obviously opposite till 4:30 on Fridays. But to enable a safe working environment, operating procedures have been reviewed to manage the demand that we've now got at the front of house. Council has promoted digital by default for a number of years, and customer services reinforce this approach at first point of contact. We are offering an appointment-only service, but if a customer does need support urgently, then they will be seen at the reception at the point that they visit then. The actions that were raised at the last meeting, I provided an update, which 5.5 of the report. The telephone directory, which we were looking at, that was to be updated across the authority. This exercise has now been completed, and any further updates, we're carrying those out to meet the service needs. That's fully supported by myself and the ICT department, where we're working together to pick up anything that wasn't covered off at the time and any changes following the initial update. The second point on the actions was housing operating model. So as of the 17th of April 2023, the telephony service for housing was changed as was requested from at the time. It is now 8:30 to 4 p.m. and that has worked well to support customers. It was also noted that some training was needed for the contact centre staff. That was provided by Highways at the time, reviewing that as we go along in our regular meetings with the manager. Updated us on their standard operating procedures and any changes to the service as needed. And also any wider issues, there are some wider issues which have been addressed, which is at the moment safety procedures at the reception area. We're looking at a communication plan and strengthening relationships across the council, and they are all in progress at the moment. In relation to data, since our last meeting, over the last 9 months now, the telephony in the contact centre, we've received 8,000 calls. I've given a breakdown of those, which are 6% of those 8,000 are to make a payment, 12% were for social services, 8% for housing, 20% council tax, 4% for housing benefit, and the remaining 50% any other queries, which cover all other services, which we expect those levels of phone calls at 8,000 due to the increase, the change in our way of working and the reliance on the telephone service. There will be a number of upcoming workshops to address any other points previously raised as those actions, and that's working with the service managers out of those workshops. That will be what shapes the service provision going forward. I move to 6.1 to 6.3, which is where we want to be, is that the council continues to promote digital by default and meet the needs of our customers. In addition, working with HR, there may be staff intranet pages that can be updated to provide information which could support the contact centre. It would be a who's who of officers, so that would work well with what we need to provide from the one-stop shop provision. Which leads then on to the last section, 7.1 to 7.3, which is what we need to do next. And this is review the extended opening hours, which will be done through monitoring and review of provision for provision of staff training and also team meetings, as previously mentioned. There will also be workshops with senior leadership team. That's going to ensure a joined up approach of how we address these points, including the escalation process. Finally, an action plan is to be drafted addressing scrutiny concerns, and this will also help us refocus how we deliver our customer services. So I'd like to invite any questions, and thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Before I bring members in with questions, just a little comment. There's a couple of questions I'll ask as well, but I'll bring members in first. This was probably one of the first items as a scrutiny group we wanted to talk about and discuss and bring forward last year when the panel started. So for me, I'm sure for everybody here today, it's good to see many of the actions identified at the workshop we had in February are being addressed, and that as a scrutiny committee then we're hopeful we've been able to attribute to the effectiveness and the ongoing improvements of this service. So thank you for that. I'm just going to open it up now to members. Gary?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for the report, but I've already shared an email with Safe, and I think I will be sent it to Rebecca. There's some key points missing from this report, where the key actions agreed back in February, which I would have expected to be included in this report as actions taken. I think one was the housing operating model, reviewing of calls, etc., which is going to involve the members in discussions with that process. I asked the question, has that happened? And were the members involved? That hasn't been addressed. There's questions asked regarding the Equalities Act, and that was going to be referred back to CMT. So my question was, has CMT SLT commenced the assessment of accessible services under the Act, and what progress has been made? Has the option of closing for training during the week been considered? If so, what was the outcome? And that was a discussion, I think, quite intense on the day. Should be a full day, half day, 1 hour, etc., 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 which was going to be taken away and discussed. There was a question regarding a navigation hub from Health, which will be shared with Rebecca, to help with adult services concerns. Social services, we're also going to put more information into the booking system to overcome problems on reception area. And then an action plan was to be developed and report presented by the 5th of March. And yet now we've got a report of September saying we're now going to do an action plan. What's happened in the last 7 months? Why hasn't an action plan been developed and reported back on that? And those questions are open from back in February, and they're not addressed within the report. And also the workshops with SLT. What is the escalation process if that's not working? When are they going to be held? How many have been held since the 7 months since we had the workshop in February? What were the outcomes? Is it working? Is it not working? So I think the report is welcome in one respect, Chair, but it hasn't picked up a lot of the concerns that Rebecca brought to our attention on that day. And for support from Scrutiny, I would have thought they would have been responded to today. So I've got a feeling that it is working. So all I'm asking for, Chair, is not so much answer now, because there's a lot of information there, but I think we need answers to those questions.
Yeah, I can come in on one point in terms of the accessibility. So, we do have an accessibility working group across the local authority that looks at the Equalities Act and service provision anyway. So, I wasn't party to that original working group discussion, but that working group has obviously started, well, not started, it's initially looked at our website provision and digital accessibility in terms of Silk Tide, in terms of website, and from a website provision perspective and services online, from a local authority perspective, that we've actually achieved a significantly high standard in that. That working group also looks at service provision constantly across the organisation, making sure that services are meeting the Equalities Act. So disability is considered in, the Equalities Act is now considered as part of any reports going up in terms of any inequalities. Obviously, we've got our strategic equality plan, which is in place as well, and out for consultation at the moment. Obviously, if Scrutiny members do want to feedback on that, they can. Andrew mentioned it earlier on in terms of looking at how accessible our document provision is, making sure we've got easy read provision. So I know there was a question on that original workshop you had, and it's not, apologies, it's not in Rebecca's report, but from an accessibility perspective in the Equalities Act, discussion of service provision, that is constantly being monitored and addressed by the equalities team, making sure that we are providing accessible services, such as even down to disability access. How do we include that in addressing our estate? So, apologies, it's not in the report you've had back today, but there is actually provision in place for that. Going back to the SLT engagement, the workshops that were pegged just haven't happened yet. We just haven't had a chance to do that. There's been other issues that have been addressed, knocked this item off the agenda, but that's not to say that it doesn't need to happen, and we will take that away and make sure it happens as soon as we can to come back and address the discussion we've had previously. It does actually feed back into the conversation about service availability against the agile provision as well.
Thanks, Ellis. Rebecca, do you want to come back in?
Yeah, just to add a few more points following on there. The housing operating model, the update I've given under 5.5 is around the telephone opening hours. That was actioned really quickly after the last meeting due to the concerns that we raised in the meeting. And I mean, the operating model itself, that's for the service manager, and I would say to give more input into that. The whole of the operating model, but in terms of the customer side of things, which I reported there, that is working well, because obviously we've got those additional hours which we are able to deal with the housing queries there, because it was, the hours were limited before. So in the terms of the report, that answers what was relevant to customer. So whether, like I said, whether we need more input from the department themselves on their operating model, I couldn't answer that question in terms of whether they change anything further than what we see at the front of house and on the telephony side. I'm just trying to remember every single point there, Guy. So obviously we're looking at the opening hours, that's going to be picked up. The navigation hub, which I didn't mention in the report, but that is that has been given over to myself about the contact details. It's, you know, I mean, we could look further into it, but is this a way of, it's just a telephone number so we can give professionals the right channel to go through? So that has been done. Whether further work could be done, I would say that'd be picked up in the workshops if there's anything further we can do, because that was just a contact number really, so that if we're struggling to get through, we've got another contact available to us. If there's anything further we can do to help the service users, then we will address that in the workshops themselves as well. I think, can't remember if there's anything else that maybe.
Would it help for you to send everything in and we'll go through it then to Rebecca or to Alice to pick up with regards to everything else? 'Cause I'm not sure if all your points have been answered, have they? No.
Sure, the point I'm making is that I've sent those questions in. I think it'd be shared. I'm not so much asking for today, perhaps another report. It was just sent to members outside the meeting to say to us to answer those points, because those were serious concerns raised by Rebecca in the meeting. All I'm looking to support her in her efforts to make provide good service, and those are points which were actions which should have been dealt with, and if they hadn't been dealt with, Scrutiny would have another role to play by saying why haven't they happened, so as to help the service more than anything else. So my view would be, I think my question have been shared, is rather than Rebecca, verbatim say today, just do a short report, say where are we with those actions? When is the action plan going to be put together? Will we see the action plan? What actions are, by whom, by when? How is it going to be reported? So there's a range of things to follow up behind the scenes here, where to stay on top of the service, to help them with that service provision. So it's not to catch anybody out, but we need answers to those questions, so we don't have the type of meeting we had in the workshop, where it was a battle between officers to be taken away, to be sorted out outside the meeting, to come back resolved. They haven't resolved matters as far as I can see there.
Okay, thanks, Gary. I can understand where you're coming from, because we were all there in that meeting and it turned into something which was probably not something which was a scrutiny function on that particular day. Ellis, would you be able to pick us up with Alan, because I know Alan was taking all this forward, and we can come back with the total response then.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, I wasn't at that workshop, but yeah, I can certainly pick it up with Alan. He's back from holiday soon. Obviously, the conversation I had with Rebecca, and my understanding, a lot of it has been answered, but obviously we can do that summary report and make sure that if there's anything a shortfall, we can address that.
Is that okay? And we can look at it then. Thanks. Any other questions? I've got a couple, sorry, Rebecca. In terms of the telephone directory, that was obviously something which was quite alarming at that particular time. In terms of the update, when people leave or people change roles, etc., is that your department's responsibility to do that then, or is it each department's responsibility to inform changes? Who actually does it then? Because we need to have some sort of robust strategy in place for it not to get to that stage again.
The responsibility lies with the service managers to ensure that they, that they update in the directory. Any new starters obviously go through the induction process, and that's how that's carried out. Obviously working with managers, we try our best to get obviously what, if they've got any new starters, any changes, processes, that comes under that in terms of our general communication. But it is down to the address book, is down to individual users and managers to update that.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. Ellis, is that something which we can look at? Because obviously over the years it's been something which has been discussed and perhaps never fully addressed and never kept on top of, really, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so we can see if there's a way to strengthen it. So there's a part protocol. Sorry, there is a protocol. I should explain that when you get a leave, when somebody leaves the organisation, it triggers from payroll a notification to IT. Right, so in terms of IT access is then adjusted and people are taken off systems. I think the bit that may have fallen between the gap is it's exactly as I said, the address book. simply because maybe that's not in the protocol, or it's left to the individual department in terms of they take on, well, who's taking over that area. So I'll speak to IT, make sure that it is factored in. Yeah, we've gone through the cleanse now. The last thing I want us to do is to go back and have mission creep back to the point where we've got to do it again. So yeah, proper upkeep, I think, is a fair ask as far as I'm concerned.
Okay, that's great. Rebecca, the new appointment system, is it working effectively? And have the issues you've faced with it as a service reduced, with a service reduced since this item was last discussed at the workshop in February?
It does remain that the level of appointments requested are really low. But departments, it is working well. I mean, the form does what it needs to. If we've presented at front of house with a customer who needs support, we complete the form, then the departments, they assess then whether the customer needs that appointment. That has worked well, as far as I've discussed with other managers. So we continue with that. We have added some services in there. And I mean, I would just say it works as it is, really. The customers, that's where we're looking at the escalation as well, because obviously if the customers who need help immediately at that, when they present at the reception, we're obviously considering what they need. So appointment isn't also, isn't always suitable. So we're trying to work out when if customers say, is an appointment appropriate, or do they need support there? And that's where it's working with the departments and knowing when to ask for an appointment.
Okay, thanks, Rebecca. There's a couple of other questions in regard to the report. On page 50 of the report back then, and under where we are now, section 5.3, it states there has been a redistribution of other work undertaken by the Customer Services Department to allow release of staff to cover the reception duties safely. Can you elaborate on this, please? What other work you're referring to here, and what effect, if any, is this having on the service?
Yeah, of course, Chair. This stands from the last report as well, where redistribution. So obviously we went into a period of time where it was just a telephony service. Because of the volume of calls, we were managing the calls well. But obviously when we need to put somebody on reception, then the telephony service will take a bit of a hit. So what we needed to do is where we would give advice on blue badges. That's been picked up through the revenues team there. They are doing a lot more of the support of the blue badges rather than where we used to at front of house. And it is redistribution in terms of we're giving more phone support rather than that support at the front of house, and giving that online help as well, rather than as we would have previously spending the time at reception. Also we've got to consider that we need to tell people to ring in or email in as well, because we'd obviously try and push the digital services. So redistribution is where we would have spent time at front of house. That isn't always possible then.
Thanks, Rebecca. On page 51 of the pack, under 5.7, you've mentioned that the number of abandoned calls rises to an average of 20% where staff take leave. Just for clarity then, is this just when one member of staff takes leave, or is it when a number of staff are on leave?
It obviously varies, but we can only have 2 members of staff off on any one day. So it could be up to 2 people out of the team of 9. So when that happens, I mean, take into consideration sickness as well, that 20% can be higher on certain days, which it has been recently. But that would be with 2 staff off out of 9.
Thanks, Rebecca. Any questions, comments from members? Councillor David Jones.
Yeah, still with questions, Chair. Still with questions.
Questions or comments?
Becca, you say the telephone directory work on that is currently completed. Is there a full directory that councillors can access, or is this like an internal directory to save councillors? So we go online, pick out somebody's name that we're looking for, rather than going through the telephone system.
In terms of contact numbers, there's 2 ways you can look for things. You can either go on your Outlook, or you can go onto the internet, and there's a telephone directory there. They fed through two different databases, but they should both be matching with each other, so you could do that. If there's something separate, something we could look at maybe. Or whether that meets the need.
Yeah,
Because you can search on the internet, you can search by somebody's name, surname, phone name.
when was this updated?
IT do a regular update of those. So every,
Only my last experience wasn't a good one.
no,
I can't remember the name, but I'll take your word for it and go back to doing that, just rather than annoying the telephonists.
yeah, was that the intranet or the Outlook?
Outlook,
Outlook. Okay.
and I can't remember what I was looking for either.
Mm,
Apologies.
yeah. When there have been occasions we can't find what we need, because that the Outlook, the database feeds what the contact center use. We use a different system altogether. So if we find somebody, or don't find somebody on there, I work with IT and we contact the person by what IT you've got on their systems, and we update it at that time then. So that's what we do if we can't find anybody. So, I mean, it should be up to date, but like I said, that depends on the information they've given across, to HR and so.
So is it worth if it happens, is it worth councils reporting it so that it is
Definitely,
corrected?
yeah. You could tell me and I can work on that one then,
Lovely, thank
because
you.
it helps us at the same time, and if we're looking for the same people. Definitely.
I mean, a suggestion there. It's a great point David makes. And we all have experience of where perhaps that directory isn't up to date. Can we circulate to all councillors where we need to make the point, perhaps, I don't know whether to Beck or whether to be to IT or somebody named in IT, so that that's got a continual review, so that councillors can pick those points up and pass those on, so they can be adjusted immediately. Is that okay? Thanks.
Okay, any other members' questions or comments? No? Okay, Rebecca, thank you very much. I'm sure this is going to rumble on for, well, it will rumble on for a little bit longer. So please bear with us. And we'll go from there. Unless you'll take the bit forward with Alan for the rest of the report. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, moving on to agenda item 6, which is the healthy organisational strategy. Yeah, Rebecca, you can go for it. Which is on page 53 to 66 of the report. Ellis and Beth will take that forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So Hannah Brown is unfortunately not with us this afternoon, but co-author of this report, Beth Jones is. So I'll hand over to Beth.
Thanks, Alice. So in March this year, we brought to Scrutiny the overview of the Healthy Organisation Strategy and the work that we have been undertaking since 2021. The Healthy Organisation Plan was part of the Recovery, Transformation and Improvement Plan. And we delivered many things over that time period. And some examples include the introduction of a corporate induction for all new starters into the local authority, investment into our apprenticeship programme. We built the organisation development team, which work with and develop our learning and development opportunities. We provided a variety of health and wellbeing programs, and we also focused on engagement activities and working with our comms team to restart the staff forum, create a managers network, design and develop a staff newsletter, and host regular monthly HR and managers meetings just to improve communication across the organisation. So as we started to move away from the RT&I plan and work began on the corporate wellbeing objectives, we started to look at creating a healthy organisation strategy that was standalone. So since the corporate wellbeing plan has been approved and published, we have worked with the corporate management team and senior leadership and staff, including our very own HR team, to build the structure for the Healthy Organisation Plan. The plan has 6 themes, which include skills development, leadership and management, culture, attraction and retention, health and wellbeing, and performance management. The strategy is a corporate organisational strategy and requires the buy-in of all areas to achieve the aims and objectives. So in addition to this, it's important to note that alongside the strategy, We are currently developing an action plan that includes initiatives and activities that underpin each of those 6 key themes. So we've brought the draft before you today as a scrutiny panel for you to provide feedback on any areas you think we need to improve on or include. And following on from this, our next steps will be to define the final version and share with Cabinet and Council. Does anyone have any questions?
Thanks, Beth. I'll open it up to members' questions and comments. You're very quiet today. It's a bit unnerving. Okay, I got a couple of questions, if that's okay. Beth, only the 3. When will the report be taken to full council for approval? And once approved of full council and subsequently published, will the strategy be subject to periodic review and be flexible in line with any organisational changing on emerging needs? First, those 2 together, then there's one more I'm going to ask then later.
Thanks, Chair. In terms of timescales, we would look to publish this in the new year, providing that it is reviewed and that we finish off. We're planning to do a further draft in terms of the way that it looks, and just to make sure that the action plan is finalised that can support the strategy going forward. And in terms of it being flexible, if you sort of look at page 64, where we've outlined the 6 key themes, we've made those promises general in terms of our promise to the workforce and people agenda in order to review what our priorities are going forward, and where we've outlined key organisational challenges. This obviously can impact on our workforce quite can't think of the word, quite significantly.
Thanks, Beth. And last one then, I noticed the strategy itself is a 2-year strategy from 23 to 25, which in the first instance is probably understandable. However, from my perspective, I think there would be a need to expand the lifespan of the strategy when it comes to reviewing future iterations of the document to satisfy the medium longer term planning. I'm not sure if you agree with those sentiments, but the reasons why I say is because within the document it states that despite being a standalone strategy, there's an alignment with a corporate plan, which is of course a 5-year plan. So the 2-year HR strategy then timeline would not necessarily correlate with a 5-year well-being objectives and goals set out in the corporate plan. So on that basis, we do agree that future iterations of this strategy then need to be more closely aligned with the timelines of the corporate wellbeing plan with more longer term goals set out.
Can I come in first, Chair? So going back to our very first item in terms of the forward plan for the scrutiny, what we're touching on is a lot of the governance architecture, building blocks for the organisation. So we mentioned the digital strategy, the data strategy, this healthy organisation strategy. We've talked about, we are trying to build, and we're going to bring back at relevant juncture the performance management framework. So what we've tried to do here is set out from the building block, which is about our workforce. This sets the context for how we're going to support our workforce in order to do their jobs and take forward the corporate plan for the organisation. So the needs of the workforce will change, obviously, as the environment changes, but that's why we've started with a very short timeline to start with, because a lot of things we need to get in place, they need to be in place fairly quick. So we may review exactly as you say, Chair, that once we've got through that initial 2-year period, I've got things under a belt and changes within the organisation are established, then we could look at a different time period more in line with the corporate plan. But very much, this is trying to address the immediate needs to put in place that healthy organisation, to try and get some traction on the issues that we've touched upon. What does the Merthyr manager look like? What are the skill sets required for an agile workforce, if that's what we remain with? So that's the logic why it's a short 2-year window to start with. Sorry, Beth.
Just to reiterate that point, that's why we've looked at the timescales in terms of organisational challenges, that things will sort of have peaks and troughs. So we wanted a strategy to address the immediate concerns.
Lovely, thanks, Beth. Any other members' comments, questions? Questions, comments? Okay.
Chair, sorry, I did have my
Oh,
hand up.
sorry, Lisa. Apologies.
That's all right, don't worry.
How could I miss you?
Exactly. How remiss of you. Just in relation to the strategy and just under attraction and retention, it's just a comment really. The fourth bullet point, of course, something that's close to my heart, and the additional work that I do is we will develop our apprenticeship schemes to recruit necessary skills gaps and strengthen our approach to succession and workforce planning. For me, it's just to reiterate the point, that apprenticeship schemes are there to help address succession and workforce planning. I think what we need to be mindful of is that it isn't just that gap and then it's filled, but then after the apprenticeship, there isn't that job opportunity. I just think within our HR policies as well, when we are recruiting apprentices, we need to make sure that, that job opportunity is as available as possible. I know that's not always, what happens because of whatever reason, but under the apprenticeship schemes, I think that needs to be the clear objective. It's set out there. For me, it just needs to be then supported in the policy behind that. Thank you.
Oh, thank you for that point. Just to reiterate around the apprenticeship programme, we work closely with our line managers that when we sort of outline that there's a need for an apprentice to fill in terms of succession and workforce planning, that whilst there may not be a guarantee of a role within that department, we look to seek and retain that staff in other areas so that we're not losing that skills, that investment and that knowledge that we've built up over the last 2 years, and we can still retain them within the local authority in any sort of means.
Thanks, Beth. That's it. There's no other members. Oh, sorry, there was. Louise.
My question's got in relation to the ageing workforce, because I'm not quite sure if it fits into this, because I know we've got the older person, the strategic officer, to deliver the ageing well plan. So I was just wondering, is there an update on that as well, the ageing well plan? Because of course, some of the aims that are covered in that cover employment as well, and building resilience with the older generation with employment. So.
Yes, good point, actually. I think that kind of analysis would be really useful to go into the item we picked up on the corporate self-assessment. So using the plans and using strategies from across the local authority to feed into that evaluation. But you are right, that obviously it includes our own workforce as well as the workforce out there in the rest of the county borough. I'll note that point, and perhaps we can raise that then in that corporate assessment.
Yeah, because I know it was briefly mentioned in the social services annual review, but I think there's still a little bit of confusion, like where is sitting that plan and who's taking it forward. Because I know obviously the grant is time bound, and I think there's only a year left. So that's my concern in relation to progress. What happens if that's not driven forward?
Yeah, I'll take that offline, because obviously I don't manage our service anymore, but I'll take it offline and find out and get back to you. Yeah.
Thanks, Andrew. Thanks, Louise. There's nobody else indicated, so we close that agenda item. Ellis, Beth, Andrew, Steve, Andrew. You're free to go on. We'll finish off for the rest of the meeting then. Thank you very much for your attendance today. Okay, Moving on to agenda item 7. You coughed, I thought you wanted to say. On to agenda item 7, the report recommendations. We'll take them all together. Is there any questions, comments, concerns with regards to these? Anything we should be looking at? Anything which we've taken forward that we haven't already addressed and asked this afternoon?
There are a lot of things will come new because you're on about the telephone directories on that. I wasn't asked a question, but I go home and going to check it first because sometimes the mobile phones are not on the directory and not their own mobile phones, the works number. So I'm going to check it because I'm going to bring it up in the next week's meeting because I don't go home and check my laptop when I want a mobile phone to complain about something or to speak to somebody. So I'm going to double check it first. But a lot of things will come out myself. Oh, good question. Answers there, questions there, but it's out there. Little things will come out of it.
I don't think that telephone directory is accurate at all.
No,
I've
agree.
I've phoned somebody and the person didn't even work for the local authority. So
I phoned the wrong director, yeah. If you want to.
I think some spot checks
Yeah.
need to be done. You know, it's good if we know we can refer it back to Rebecca now that that she can get it altered.
But it's a mobile phone and mobile phone for me to get the works number mobile phone.
Okay, thanks, Bill. Anybody with anything else?
For me,
Please.
Oh, sorry.
it's just something really just for us not to lose sight of in relation to the healthy organisation stuff, like the combined staff, including schools, of staff aged 50 plus. It's like 987. So so we don't lose sight of that aging well plan as well. So for now, because I'm still a bit confused about where to sit in. So for now, it's been added on to social services scrutiny as additional items. So we don't lose sight of it. But I look forward to speaking to Andrew about that because, like he said, he's going to take it offline because there's still a little bit of confusion about who's taking that forward because I think they've had some staffing issues. Because that's key as well in looking after those staff.
Thanks, Louise. Anybody else? Okay, we'll move on to agenda item number 8, scrutiny referrals. We haven't any scrutiny referrals been received. Agenda item 9, feedback on scrutiny activities, outstanding actions, etc. We haven't got any on there on this item, but I'm mindful of the fact that we had a self-evaluation workshop last week, and it was only myself and obviously Gary there. We had apologies from all of the members. So we took the decision on the day to reschedule it. We could have gone through the report, but I didn't see it would be beneficial from just myself and Gary when we were missing four members from the group. So we took a decision to rearrange it. And Bill was waiting for a online one as well, which didn't happen. So we probably need to decide on a rough date on that sooner rather than later. Safe, can I leave that with you to send out some dates?
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. Yeah.
Is that okay with everybody else over the next month or so, is it? Yeah.
Yeah, I have to work around the dates because that's how things go.
Right. Can we have a few different suggestions of times as well? Because I know that one was at 2 o'clock in the afternoon.
Is a later time better for everybody else?
It is for me, but I can't speak for everybody else. But yeah.
Quite hardly up at 4 o'clock.
Okay. So would any time after 4 be beneficial for everybody else? Lee, Gary? Yeah, okay, so if we can have Lisa, would later on be better for you? Yeah, okay, so safe if we can have a choice of different dates and we'll go with the majority, would that be okay? Okay, great, thanks very much. Moving on to agenda item 9.1 is the feedback on the workshop we had on the 31st of July 2023 on the transition of the recovery, transformation and improvement plan. You've all got it in the report, but that's just to close off everything which has gone on. Any questions, comments in respect to that? Are we all okay? Yep, okay, that's fantastic. Moving on to agenda item 10. I was going to say agenda item chair then. Well, it is sort of, I suppose, but agenda item 10. Any other business deemed urgent by myself? I haven't got any. That's great. Thank you all for attending today. Have a lovely rest of the evening. Enjoy the lovely weather we've got in Merthyr Tydfil.
Thanks, guys.